a group of people who were exhibitors, like librarians, archivists, museum directors, curators. And now, in this third millennium, right, the word curator is kind of just thrown around anymore, right? Like, really, anyone can be a curator. You may have different levels of skill, but anyone can really be a curator thanks to the abundance of information out there and learned skills. So here's what curators, modern curators, look like. Here's another picture. Looks like we have an archivist down at the bottom there. And then also another one. These are what modern day curators might look like. In our own state, did you know, another fun fact, that we have a state archives? We have, it's right down, actually, if look at the top picture there, that is the State Archives building, houses the State Historical Society. And that's where they will archive historical documents and stuff like that from South Dakota. Very cool building, by the way, if you've ever been in there. It's built into the hillside. And then also there's the South Dakota State Library, and that's where I work. And the State Library focuses on digitally archiving state documents, government documents. And so it still happens all the time, this curation process. So there are 3 basic steps to curation. And look, I am simplifying this. I know I am. But for the sake of this presentation, we're kind of doing a bird's eye view. There are 3 steps. The first is to scan, then to make sense of, and then to share. The first part is to scan, right? And this is where we actually find and we locate, we collect it, and we catalog that information. This skill requires a lot of support at the beginning. So especially with our little ones in elementary school, they need a lot of support, even in middle school. This is where we teach kids about their topic choice, right? About what's a keyword versus a subject, the Boolean operators, all those things, so that they can locate the information they might need and the information they don't need. The next step is sense making. This is where we actually engage with the resources that we choose, and we decide, we discern, we critique, we evaluate whether or not that information is going to work for what we need or what our audience needs. This is especially difficult for our middle schoolers who are just acquiring these types of critiquing skills. This is hard. This is where it takes time you have to actually sit down and dive into the resources, right? This is the hard part, and the part that just high schoolers in particular don't really like, because they, might rather be on their phones doing something else other than doing some synthesis or some critiquing of resources. This is where you might filter, you might sort, figure out what to do with the actual information. How are you actually going to use it for yourself or for your audience? The next step is to share, and this is that digital component. Now, curators have always shared, they've just shared in different forms, right? Now, so much of how we curate is through digital means. We circulate. How do we contain all the information so that we can showcase it and circulate it for others? And this is an important part, because thank goodness, with the amount of information out there, thank goodness we have a way to decipher all the information that's out there. We have digital tools to help us do that. So it is important to know your purpose. Sometimes you are the subject, the curator, right? And sometimes you are the consumer or the direct object. Sometimes we do this for personal purposes. And I'll give you an example here. So my husband and I just built a house. And when I say we just built it, I really mean, like, for the most part, I would say 90% of it we built ourselves. And holy cow, the lists that I have created to get this job done. I use Pinterest, I use Wayfair. My husband YouTubed like nobody's business to figure out how to do certain tasks or build certain things that maybe he wasn't aware of. And of course, I use Instagram as well for kind of inspiration. So if you would, I would like for you to go out to that bit.ly link that I gave you, and I would like for you to list just one way that you use curation. So how do you collect, organize, and share information for personal purposes? Let's see if you can all go out there. I'll go out there with you here. Hey, there you go. Ooh, someone built a deck. I email myself sites, I do too. Podcasts, yep. Teaching ideas. Ooh, someone uses Destiny Collection, so that's a library management system. Sweet. Use it for sharing lessons. Ooh, renovating a family barn. That sounds fascinating. I would love that. Choosing a grad school program. Very good. These are fun to see. Spotify playlists. Someone says, I don't make them, but I sure appreciate people who do. Me too, right? Like, I ain't got time for that. Facebook, together school-related sites, very good. Okay, so folks, we just curated. We were just curators there. That's what we did. How awesome are we, right? We used Padlet, a digital tool, to curate a list of ways that we use curation for personal purposes. Pretty simple. Padlet is a commonly used tool in schools, and one that I would recommend if you're new to curation. I would recommend starting off with Padlet. It's a pretty easy to use tool. Very good. Thank you for your responses. Moving on, and sometimes we use curation for professional purposes, right? And some of you had already listed some professional purposes a little bit. Let's see if we can come up with just a few different ways, maybe using specific tools that you already use for professional purposes. And go ahead and use the chat feature for that one. Ryan, we should see the chat maybe blow up a little bit, hopefully. I'm gonna figure out how I can see chat on here.
It's going crazy.
Oh, there it is. Oh, it is going crazy. Sweet. We like that, right?
Yeah.
Google Classroom, Wakelet, Twitter, South Dakota State Library, SDPBS, very good. They have a great menu of items. Yeah, Symbaloo, love Symbaloo for little kids especially. Seesaw, Class Dojo, ooh, love that. Very good. I'm looking to see if StoryCorps, I've never used that one, to see if there's any on here that I have not used. I've used quite a few. Remind. Ooh, the Library of Congress. That's hardcore right there. Very good. Live binders, that's another really good one. Good, thank you. Again, we just simply use the chat to curate a list of ideas here. Pretty simple. Okay, let me get back to my, so for professional, I'll give you an example of how I use curation for professional purposes. Now look, I get really overwhelmed with all the stuff out there. There are so many tools that you can use. And I'm a big believer in picking a few and sticking with it. Unless something super duper amazing can replace something else, I try to stick with what I know and what I like. And I think it's less confusing for me as the curator, and it's less confusing for students as the consumers. And I have, I've also kind of witnessed this with the whole school at home deal, where even my own kids as teachers, they use so many different kinds of programs, which is awesome, but it's also like, can we just stick with a couple, right? Because it can get overwhelming. So I use Twitter for social bookmarking. I find so many great ideas on Twitter from other professionals. I do not use Twitter for personal reasons, just for professional, and that works really well for me. Does it still stress me out? Sometimes, yeah, right? I use Pocket as a reading aggregator. So in my job, I do a lot of reading, a lot of professional reading. And so I am able to save articles that I need to read into Pocket and save them for later to read while maybe I'm sitting at the doctor's office and I have my phone available. I can read it from my phone, right? I use Pearltrees as a content collector and a way to create resource lists to organize and share. And then lastly, I use Wakelet to communicate via a newsletter. Now you can use Wakelet like you would use Pearltrees. I just don't because I like the setup for Pearltrees better for collecting content, but that's just me. Okay, let's go to the next slide here. So curation is a core competency for participation in the digital world. What it also does is it supports digital literacies and other types of literacies. So when you're thinking about transliteracy, so like the intermingling of all the literacies and how they kind of vibe together, digital curation is just a natural part of that. It certainly is a natural part of information literacy, which is just a fancy word for the research process. Digital curation also builds positive digital footprints and interactions with others. You know, there are so many opportunities to build negative digital footprints, but used correctly, digital curation can really support that positive digital footprint, especially as kids are building digital portfolios and looking at going into college or the workspace. Digital curation boosts participation by allowing students to demonstrate learning. So many ways to demonstrate using digital curation tools. It can support differentiated learning too. And it naturally deepens critical thinking and inquiry. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit later as well. Digital curation is a common standard across various content areas and frameworks. For instance, we see it in the ISTE standards. Let me see if I can move this over. Students curate a variety of sources using digital tools to construct knowledge, produce creative artifacts, and make meaningful learning experiences for themselves, the subject, the curator, and others, the direct object or the consumer. We also see it in the American Association of School Librarians, their shared foundations. They say it's making meaning for oneself and others by collecting, organizing, and sharing resources of personal relevance. I really like that succinct definition. We also see it in our own school library standards. Yes, we have school library standards. I know that's a surprise to some people, but they are there, and they are a part of the Department of Education. The school library standards naturally embed with a lot of other content areas, and we see curation in the second strand, so the information literacy strand of the school library standards. Again, it's part of that research process. So in kindergarten, we ask that our kids be able to curate print resources with guidance. Then when we move up to third grade here, you can see that we're asking them to curate with print and digital resources with guidance. By sixth grade, we're asking them to do that, still with guidance, but using a variety of tools. And those tools could be digital, although they don't necessarily need to be. By eighth grade, we're asking them to independently be able to curate using tools. Eighth grade, people, right? And then by ninth through 12th grade, so high school, we're asking them to both independently and to collaboratively. They need to be able to also work well with others to do these things. So you can see that progression there. So guidance in our schools looks like modeling safe, smart practices, which is also modeling digital citizenship, creating exemplars. So create examples so that your kids know exactly what to do and what to expect, that you expect from them. Creating resource lists for students and coworkers. As a librarian, I do this all the time. This is an embedded part of my profession. And this is becoming more and more important as the amount of information increases in our educational world. Providing frameworks and scaffolds for practice, especially as we move through the grade levels. We need more support in our elementary and middle school, and probably less in our high school, but a deeper learning at the high school level. You need to provide the tools. And look, we know this is an equity issue. We've seen this with this distance learning deal at home, right? Some of our kids have access to these tools and some don't. And this is something that we all know we need to work on. Providing time, very important. This curation takes a while. It's not like, oh, just sit down and write me a 4-sentence paragraph. This is going to take a while. This is part of an embedded part of the research process. I would always give more time than what you think. And then lastly, providing feedback is very important. So what can digital curation look like in our classroom? And as we're creating these lesson plans, it can look like a simple student, just as an assignment. And I'm going to show you an example of that later. Or it can be a more complex project. It could look like just one basic section out of the research process. So annotating research might look like presentations, digital portfolios, that's a big one right now. Digital storytelling. It's great for illustrating opinions, and I'll show you an example of that later. And on the professional side, it's great for professional development. Like I said, I use Twitter for that. And then also creating engaging lesson plans. and then communicating with parents and students. Are there any questions? I'm going to see if I can, I'm going to stop here for just a second. I'm going to see how I can see my chat here. Give me just a second. I'm still figuring out this whole Zoom deal. Whoop. Okay. So let's go through. I don't know how this got moved. Hold on. Okay, back to where I was. So any good digital curation tool will collect. It'll also save various types of information, whether that be a video, could be a blog link, it could be a PDF even, just lots of numerous things. It will annotate, it organizes, it filters, it shares, it tags, it embeds, and for me, the key is if it doesn't have an extension, like a Google Chrome extension or some type of extension, or isn't accessible from my phone, I won't use it. I need to have easy linking. Those extensions allow for you to actually do the hard work of linking. At their core though, all these digital curation tools, they need to be functional. And what's functional for me might not necessarily be functional for you as a curator. And certainly what's functional for me as a curator might not be super functional for someone as the consumer. They need to be reliable, and I would say most of them are, at least the ones I have used. And then for me, one of the more important things is they need to be engaging. Like if I'm bored with it, I'm not going to use it as a curator or as a consumer. So I'm going to go through just 11 tools. There are so many more out there, but these are ones that I have either used or I know are used very often, and ones that I would recommend that you start with. So for solid content curation in a super easy to capture way and for the curator, and then in a digestible way for the consumer of the curation, I use Pearltrees. I love Pearltrees. And let me just take you out so you can see kind of what it looks like on my end of it as the curator. I happen to have a paid account, but it's not necessary. I just wanted some bells and whistles that, you know, I think as in a classroom environment, I wouldn't necessarily need. And so this is my collection. These are all of my my boards. You could call them boards or you can call them lists, right? So I have several here, and within my collection, let's just click on digital books here. I have created a resource list for people to access, and it's all about digital books. I mean, look at all these. By the way, if you haven't accessed this is great if you're looking for some avenues for accessing digital books for your students. Here's a whole bunch of free ones. And then these are just kind of general ones, and then the ones from the State Library. Now, what I like about Pearltrees is I like the way it's laid out. I can see a whole slew of resources in one shot without having to do a ton of scrolling. And if I click on one resource, kind of I'll give you an idea of how you can use it to maximize it for your audience. Up here is the title, but it's also the hot link that will take you to the resource itself. This gives you the actual address or URL of the website. Here are all the ways in which I can edit. I can archive it even. I can share it. Again, like I said, any good digital curation tool will allow you to share in different ways. And you can see all of these different ways in which I can share. I can even do a QR code or share to these areas. I can also embed my collection inside of a web page as well. And then I can open it this way too, or I can open it by clicking on the title. It will always give you an image that's related to the resource. But this is the key right here, where you get to annotate or editorialize what exactly is beneficial about this source. And why would one want to actually use it? I can go to the next source this way, right? So that's just one tool that I use, and there's so much more to it. You would have to dive into it a little bit more. But again, this is what I use for all of my resource lists. Go back here. Whoop. The next one I've used is, if you go back to the slideshow, the next one I've used is Diigo. At least I think that's how you pronounce it. And I have used this one and then I gave up on it. And the reason is because it was just kind of like not cute enough for me, right? I needed to see more visuals. But that's me. But this is one way. It's basically the same thing as Pearl Trees. It's just in a more linear format here. You would add the link in, and then you annotate what you need. You can do some little sub pages here as well. Another one is Symbaloo, and I know many of you have used Symbaloo for content curation. I like it too. Excuse me, I swear I do not have COVID-19, by the way. I just need a drink of water. I've used Symbaloo, and when I was in K-12 education, that was my go-to. And for my audience now, it doesn't really work. I prefer Pearl Trees, but Symbaloo is another great one. And I'm not going to go to it because it is one that many of you I already know use. So again, these are more if you just want your basic content curation, super easy to use. You don't have to learn a whole bunch of stuff for it. Next one, for curating resource lists and in-depth editorializing, I like Scoop.it. I have some librarian friends who use Scoop.it. I also like Padlet, and if you'll remember, we use that for listing our professional or our personal reasons we would use curation. There's a lot more to Padlet, of course. And then eLink.io is another one that I use for our school library blog, and I'm going to show you an example of that later. I do want to show you Scoop.it real quick, just to kind of give you an idea what it looks like. Pam Kringle created this, and she's a librarian in Pierre, at the high school in Pierre. And you can see that she scooped up this presentation, and it looks like it was a school board meeting, so it's a video. She just linked it in. You can see it's from YouTube, and then she gave some editorial or annotated it there too. You can also do an insight, which is kind of cool on Scoop.it. You can like editorialize the editorial. So that's a cool one. And this has a lot of scrolling involved, which is cool too. It just depends on kind of what you want to do. Okay. go to the next one, Wakelet. Love Wakelet. Ty, I know, uses Wakelet pretty heavily. It's a great resource. I do not use it for basic content curation, like creating lists and stuff like that, but I do use it for digital portfolios. I've actually created my own digital portfolio with it, and I also use it for communication purposes. So creating newsletters for my audience. So in that case, if you're in K-12, your audience could be parents, or it could be your class, your classroom students. It might not even be school board members if you're doing a school board presentation. Wakelet is really cool. And I'm sure you know about this because you've probably seen it through Ty here. But like, for instance, here is one newsletter that I have created for school librarians in the state. And it is a kind of a more scrolling form, which I really like for this purpose, this newsletter purpose. And you're basically, you can add, I'm going to edit just so you can see how easy it is. I can add a section here and look at all of the different things I can do to curate my newsletter. I can upload a PDF. I can insert a Flipgrid video. Love Flipgrid. Okay, so Wakelet, awesome, love it. Seesaw is very similar in terms of, like, if you want to create a digital portfolio. I have not used Seesaw, but I know a lot of especially high school teachers do. Flipgrid, love Flipgrid, and you probably know this from Ty as well. If you went on the Flip Hunt, right? It is a video-based content curator and creator. I love this. If I were still in the K-12 classroom, which, you know, someday I might go back, I don't know yet, I would be using this for responses of reading. So if we were doing, let's say, hey, okay, we're doing, we have to read chapters 7 through 9 of our novel. I don't want you to write anything because I'm sick of grading writing. What I want you to do is I want you to go on and give me your response to these questions on Flipgrid in a video format, and then I could just watch it and grade it that way. Love Flipgrid. And now they have video shorts, which is you can create your own short videos. So you could do instructional videos up to, I think it's 10 minutes. So
Hey, Alyssa.
Definitely take a look at that one. Yep.
Just want to give you a 10-minute warning. And then we did have a question wanting to know if all of these choices are free or if they are charged for them.
All of the ones that I have showed you are free because I'm not going to show you something that you have to pay for right away, right? Now, can you upgrade? Absolutely. A lot of them you can upgrade, but I would think for the most part, if you're not doing any real specialized work, some real deep work, then I think the free versions on most of them are just fine. Like, for sure, the free version of Flipgrid, absolutely. You wouldn't even have to buy anything. For instance, I did purchase Pearl Trees, but again, the reason I did that is just because of my audience. If I was in K-12, I wouldn't have. And then lastly, I wanted to just let you know about these 2 reading aggregators. And Pocket is the one I use, and it has basically saved my sanity because there is so much that I like to read and I need to read for my own work, especially right now. There's so much information coming at us about this distance learning. I'm able to save any article, any website that I find on the web, and I can save it into Pocket. And basically all it is a storehouse for everything I want to read. And I have it on my phone, and I can just take it with me wherever I go. Flipboard is very similar. I just don't use it because why would I use two when I have the one? So if you do a lot of professional reading, or even if you're looking for articles or websites that you want your kids to read, Pocket is a good way to kind of lump those all together for them. So one hot tip, right? As an English teacher, I would absolutely have my kids annotate or editorialize anything that they're curating. That helps with critical thinking. It really makes them look a little bit deeper at the resource. So here's an example of how you can do that. This was used using eLink.io, and it is, again, it's a content curation tool, and the assignment was to interpret the right of free speech as specified in the First Amendment, right? And so what the students had to do was find 2 articles showcasing how free speech is interpreted, and instead of just doing, you know, like a basic handwritten paragraph, something like that, the student had to go in and create one using eLink.io, and you can see the title of the assignment right here. Here's the objective, which is awesome for kids to know exactly what they should be doing. Here's the linked image. This is the link to the article and the article title. I'm gonna move this here. And here is the editorial. So, whoops, a student would have to go in and describe why they use this article and how it supports their opinion. And then lastly, at the bottom, you'll see the source too. So you kind of see everything in one shot, and it's just a more graphic and fun way, an engaging way for students to be able to do school assignments, right? And I'm going to finish up with 2 resources that I'm going to leave you with. If you don't know about the blog and the podcast called The Cult of Pedagogy, it's amazing. Go to that if you want lesson resources. I have learned so much from her, so I would definitely recommend that. And she does have a couple of articles and a couple of podcasts just on content curation as well. And then lastly, go ahead and see if you can check out the book called Content Curation: How to Avoid Information Overload. I know that TyReads, there's a free digital version on TyReads, so if you are a member district, you can access that for free, which is awesome. If you choose to buy it, it's a pretty low cost book as well, and that is a good one for a professional collection. So I guess we're going to stop, and I'm going to see if we have any questions. I'm trying to find any questions before I let you go. My contact information is here, and like I said, you are more than able to use this copy of the slideshow if you want to reproduce it and give it to your staff. You can certainly do that.
Lisa, there was a question on.
Yeah, let me look.
Can the URLs from library databases be linked, and will they open, or is it just from the website searches that will link?
They can be linked. We actually have a list of the exact link. It's on our LibGuides. You'd have to go to library.sd.gov and then our LibGuides, and you could find it there. And I could probably put that in my session resources too on how to actually do that. Maybe I'll do that for you. But yeah, you can link to just specific databases, because there are about 50 of them, right? And that are free to use for all South Dakotans. And of the 50, about 20 of them are for K-12. And so you would want to make sure that you don't overwhelm your students with too many options.
I had one more question just come in. The challenge we have is that many tools get blocked at our school. For example, the cameras on computers are blocked for student use. How difficult are these for students to incorporate? Many students are having difficulty with just turning in assignments on Microsoft Teams.
Oh, I know. And I hate to say it, but it's kind of a local deal. I mean, this is where you kind of need to advocate to your administration about accessibility and equity, and really figuring out how to teach in a technology-driven world. And I do wonder if the video is blocked at school but not at home. And even then, can students take the tool home? I don't know. But that's an advocacy kind of deal. It's tough.
Okay, at that, Alyssa, I think we are going to end the session. We'll stop the recording. Thank you so much, Alyssa. This was great.
You bet.